Hi, this is Rick Adams from practicalcsm.com, and today's Customer Success Rants and Musings is episode 28, and the question we're asking is, what is NPS and how is it calculated? So just to be clear, these are only meant to be like 4 or 5 minute little rants and musings. This is not a complete guide to Net Promoter Score, NPS. This is just answering the question, what is it and how is it calculated? Not how do you use it, in what circumstances should you use it, what are the pros and cons of using it, what are the traps and pitfalls and challenges of using it, what are some examples? No. Okay, sorry. It's only what is it and how is it calculated. So if you already know that, well, it might be of interest to you, but mostly I'm really aiming this at people who perhaps are a bit confused. What is it and how does it work in its basic sort of concept? So that's what we're going to cover today. So what is it? NPS, it stands for Net Promoter Score. It was developed by Fred Reichheld of Bain & Company. And the idea is it helps you to think about not just what a customer says as a customer satisfaction level, and they just rate you and that's that, but actually what's the meaning behind their satisfaction, their real level of satisfaction, the meaningful side, by focusing on advocacy. So it works by focusing on advocacy. It asks them a specific question about whether they would be prepared to be your advocate, which then is more true meaning around their trust and their loyalty and their satisfaction level than just asking them, are you satisfied? And it's often used to give a sort of an indicator, if you like, of the overall health of the relationship between your company and the customer. So that's what it is. So the way it works is very straightforward. There is a question that you ask your customer, and the question is up the top in the middle there, and the question is, how likely is it that you would recommend us to a friend or a colleague? That's the question. Okay, so you don't change that question. That is the question that you ask if you're using classic Net Promoter Score. How likely is it that you would recommend us to a friend or colleague? Now, when I say us, you can put in your brand name there. So if I was, for example, Mercedes-Benz, then I can say, how likely is it that you would recommend Mercedes-Benz to a friend or colleague? And if I was Mercedes-Benz, I might well do that. So I could say us, or I could say my brand name. But other than that, we don't change that sentence. And we send that out as a survey question, and we ask our customer stakeholder, who we're sending the survey out to answer by rating from 0 to 10, how that likelihood. So 0 meaning not likely at all, 10 meaning extremely likely, and 5 meaning neutral. Okay, 0, not at all likely, 5, neutral, 10, extremely likely. And all we are asking them to do is, like, if you like, click a button over the number that is their number. A 7, a 5, a 10, a 4, a 1, whatever is their answer. That's it. So it's one of the good things about NPS is that there's a very low boundary in terms of what we expect the customer to have to do. Only takes them a moment. They read the question, click a button. That's it. Job done. Now, of course, you could use it in a bigger, wider survey as well, but then you've got to be a bit careful that you're not having leading questions leading up to it that sort of influence their answer. Okay, so you've got to think about that. But you could have questions afterwards, of course, and make it into a longer survey afterwards as well. That is entirely possible. But basically, just NPS, from the customer's point of view, is very easy for them to contribute their response. However, of course, their response is very minimal. So it is just a number from 0 to 10. So I wouldn't bet your shirt on it particularly. They haven't put a lot of effort necessarily into thinking of their answer. They've just gone, oh, it's that. So anyway, their response comes in, and what you do is you then apply a formula where you ignore any responses that come in as a 7 and an 8. And then what you do is you take the percentage of respondents who put in a 9 or a 10, they're your promoters, and you subtract, that's a new word, subtract the percentage of the respondents who put a 0 through to a 6. And that is your NPS score. So for example, if you had 100 customers that you surveyed with NPS, and you asked them this question and they all chose their number, and you're now collecting this information back in, let's say out of those 100, maybe 20 of them answered a 7 or an 8. So you just ignore those. So that leaves you with 80 that you're actually interested in. And of those 80, perhaps 60 of them said a 9 or a 10, and 20 of them said a 0 to a 6. So 60 out of 100 is 60%. So your promoters were 60%. 20 out of 100 is 20% by my reckoning. I'm good at maths. So that's 20% detractors. 60% minus 20% is 40. So the NPS in that situation is 40. So it's a number, 40. Now, that doesn't tell you a lot on its own, but what's quite interesting is then you can look at the pattern as you move forwards in time. So if you were to survey the same set of customers, or even an expanding group of customers, regularly every 12 months or 6 months or whatever the right cadence is, depending upon what you sell and how you sell it and who your customers are, then once you've built up the data over time, maybe you can see a trend. So if you see the NPS going down, that tells you that your customers are less loyal and enthusiastic about you. If you see the number going up, then you'll see that your customers are more loyal and enthusiastic about you. So a higher number is better, is what we're saying. Because the question and the calculation is standard, you can also compare yourself with industry standards. So for example, and this is the last thing I'm going to show here, we could talk for much more depth, but here's an example of 2 flights that I went on. And after I went on those flights, guess what? Those airlines sent me a survey form to fill in. You can see it looks very familiar. It says, on the basis of your experience, how likely would you be to recommend British Airways to a friend or colleague? Please indicate using a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is not at all likely and 10 is extremely likely. Well, there we go. So it's exactly the words. On the basis of this experience, how likely would you be to recommend Aer Lingus to a friend or colleague? Please indicate how likely you are using a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is not at all likely and 10 is extremely likely. Same question, same set of numbers, same thing. I just click the button. So now, if both British Airways and Aer Lingus publish that information, which they may well do, then we can compare ourselves as our organization. Maybe we've got a third airline, and we can see whether our NPS is lower or higher than others in the same industry or sector. So we can compare it internally and trends over time, and we can compare right now in terms of how well we're doing within our industry. So lots of more things that we could talk about, but hopefully that's given you some idea of what NPS is and how it is calculated. And I hope you've enjoyed that and found it useful. So please do feel free to share any comments or observations you want as well. Feel free to visit practicalcsm.com, download chapter 1 of my book. And that's it for me, Rick Adams, saying thank you for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in a future episode of Rants Musings. Thank you.